Well, hello, amazing parents, and welcome to another episode of Graceful Parenting, the program where we talk about what the Bible really says about parenting. I'm Amy Hayes, your host, and the author of the recently published book, Graceful Parenting. And in the program, we've been going through the book chapter by chapter, and this week we are on chapter 12. So we only have one more chapter after this. If this is the first time you're joining me, welcome. Feel free to go back and watch some of the previous episodes through the on-demand feature of this network. And you can also get your copy of the book and the workbook through the QR code and the website listed on the screen so that you can follow along. I don't have time in this program to go through everything, so it's really helpful to have the book as well. I'm just trying to add additional insights into what's in the book. So if you really want to get the most out of it, get yourself a copy of the book and the workbook. So today's lesson is entitled Above All Else, and we're all familiar with the verse in Proverbs that says, above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. And last week we talked about desire and how desire is an expression of the heart, and how that desire is the fuel for all human endeavor and all human accomplishments. So it's super important to be able to fuel that fire of desire in your child so that they don't grow apathetic to their desires over time, because that's what happens. That's why as an adult, it's so difficult to pursue your desires and dreams, because as a child, most of the time, our desires are suppressed, denied, ignored, downplayed. And so we learn over time to suppress our own desires, that just be logical, don't live by desire, don't dream, don't hope for better. So we talked about acknowledging and validating and honoring your child's desires. So today's lesson is going to dovetail off of that. One of the main reasons you want to fuel the desire is because it's an expression of the heart. And mostly we're going to talk about the heart today, because the heart is the source of everything we do, as we've already said, and the scripture tells us. So honoring desire is super important in connecting with your child's heart. But if you want to influence your child's heart, which then influences everything that he does, then you have to connect with the heart. So that's what I'm going to teach you today. And the heart is mentioned in the scriptures more than almost 5,000 times, which is more than a lot of the top topics put together, like faith, love, heaven. You can put all those together, and the references to the heart far exceed it, but we've become so focused on behavior that we've forgotten the source of it, which is the heart. So if you want to influence your child's life, you've got to connect with his heart. Sorry, lost my train of thought there. So guarding our child's heart is important. Why is guarding our child's heart important? Well, the Bible tells us to guard our hearts. And most of us don't know what that means or how to do that very well. We weren't taught. And so how can we teach our children to guard their hearts if we don't understand it? Well, I'm going to teach you a method today that I've discovered through years and years of reading and learning and putting things together, that I've found to be very effective in guarding my own heart and also guarding my children's hearts. So why do we want to guard our heart? Well, as we've already said, it's the source of all our behavior. It's the true you. Your heart, you're not your physical being. You are your inner man. So the heart, when the Bible says the heart, it's talking about your inner man, or you could say your soul, who you really are. And that's the seat of your emotions, your character, everything that affects your life. So as Solomon summarized it, guard your heart, because everything you do flows from it. The other thing about our heart, the other important reason to guard it, is that sin is actually a matter of the heart. It's not behavior. Because once again, the act of sinning comes from what's in our heart. Jesus made this very clear when he said in Matthew 5 that a man could commit adultery in his heart just by having lust for a woman and never acting on it. So you could look at someone and say, oh, they've never committed adultery, and you could be dead wrong. He said the same thing about murder, that when you're angry with your brother, it's the same as murdering. So he's talking about what's in our heart. Anger is an emotion, comes from inside and from the heart. So it isn't what our behavior that matters to God. We don't behave our way into favor with God. He's looking at our heart, and he's looking for a heart of faith and of trust in Him. But most importantly, the heart is the place where we meet with God. You know, the Bible talks about the secret place. Well, that's not a room or a space in your home that you set up so you can have peace and quiet so you can talk to God. There's nothing wrong with that. But the secret place is your heart. You know, when Jesus says, go into your closet and close your door, well, that might have been a physical example, but the closet is our heart. Go inside and talk to God. That's where we talk to God, in our heart. We don't talk to God in our head. God isn't speaking. Well, we can hear God through our logic, and it does interpret what God says to us. But where we meet with God and hear His voice comes through our heart. It will come to our head into tangible thoughts, but it comes through our heart. So no wonder the enemy wants to harden and wound our hearts, because this is where we connect with God and the spiritual realm, and it's where everything we do flows from. So you can see that if our heart is hardened or wounded, we'll have a hard time hearing God. And if you can't hear God's voice, you'll never fulfill your destiny, which is why I do everything that I do, because I believe that the role of parents is to identify, define, and draw out their child's destiny, because God created each of us for a purpose on the earth so that we can bring heaven to earth. That's our role as human beings. But if we're focused on being good, we'll never fulfill our God-given destiny. If we're worried about playing it safe so we don't break any rules, we'll never do everything God designed for us to do in our lifetime on this earth. So I believe that's why the church is weak, because we have focused on behavior, and the best that we're going to get with that result, the best result we're going to get with that focus are well-behaved churchgoers. And that's not changing the world, and it never will. So the world gets the message from us to be good and do the right things. No, be who God created you to be. You're going to make mistakes along the way. That never stopped God from calling out greatness in people. And we talked about that, I think, in lesson 7, how God always speaks to our true identity and He ignores behavior. He just overlooks it because He knows once He gets our heart that our behavior will follow. And that's what we need to do as parents. We need to get a hold of our children's lives, because when you affect your child's heart, that's when you have influence in their life. So huge benefit to connecting with your child's heart. You will grow closer every single day. And all through their life into adulthood, you'll have this ever deepening relationship of mutual trust and respect. And that's what all of us want with our kids, right? You'll have influence in their lives, like I've already said. But another benefit of connecting with your child's heart is that you're building them up. You're affirming their true identity, their true self, when you connect with their heart, because that's where the true self resides. And so you're building their self-esteem and creating a positive self-image for them. And this will become the foundation for them to be everything that God created them to be. So another benefit of connecting with your child's heart is that it develops a high EQ. And that's a term that psychologists use to refer to emotional intelligence, or the ability to understand and connect with people at the emotional level. So what they found is that all successful leaders have very high emotional intelligence, or EQ. So when you develop your child's ability to, when you connect with your child's heart, you're developing his ability to navigate his emotions, because emotions are the language of the heart. We're going to talk more about that in just a minute. And then when you develop a solid relationship with your child at the heart level, you're laying a foundation for every relationship your child will have in his life. Because psychologists tell us that we model all of our relationships after the one we had with our parents when we were small. So if you have a superficial, if you think, oh, everything's just fine, me and my child are great, I don't need to worry about, any of that emotional connection and all that. Well, that's the kind of relationships he'll have for his whole life. Kind of superficial, just getting by. We don't have to get really super deep. But if you apply yourself to this, and it's not hard, you'll see in a minute, it's very simple to do, then you're going to give your child that, you're going to lay that template, showing that this is how you have true deep relationships, and it will serve him in every aspect of his life. Marriage, family, also friendships, business, They said that leaders have the high EQ. And then lastly, you'll also, and this is not by far not all the benefits, but just what I've listed here today, is that by nurturing and connecting with your child's heart, you nurture his ability to hear God's voice and then subsequently fulfill his destiny, because we need God to lead us in our destiny. There's no formula for fulfilling a destiny. We're all unique in that. So the question now becomes how? How do I connect with my child's heart? It sounds complicated. I think this is going to be like a college course. No, I'm going to teach you in less than 5 minutes how to do this. And it's going to follow the pattern we established last week with honoring desire, and that is acknowledging, validating, and empathizing. And so it's just those 3 simple steps. It's just a matter of being aware and being ready in the moment. And it has to do with emotions. You can't talk about the heart without talking about emotions. Dr. Jim Richards says that emotions are the language of the heart. Logic is the language of the head. Emotions are the language of the heart. So in order to connect with your child's heart, you have to listen to what his heart's saying. And the way that you do that is through his emotions, which are his heart speaking. Now, with children, this is not hard to do. They wear their emotions on their sleeve. And that's actually a good thing, because that becomes our guide to addressing their heart, connecting with their heart. So what we used to dread, emotional outbursts from our children, now become the best opportunity to connect with your child's heart and thereby guard and nurture his heart. And so, in the church, emotions have gotten a bad rap because we didn't understand this. Well, if we have emotions as human beings, then God has them, because we're created in his image. And if God has emotions, they can't be bad. It's what separates us from other creatures. Animals don't have emotions per se. They operate on instinct. It's just automated behavior. And but humans are not so. But in the church, we haven't understood them. And there's not been good training about emotions, or how to navigate them, or how to help your child through his emotions. I've heard some terrible teachings in the church about emotions, like what to do when your child throws a tantrum, like ignore him. Well, okay, we're going to talk about what happens when you ignore emotions. They get stored in your body, which causes all sorts of disease. In fact, studies show that all disease is the result of stored negative emotions. So mental, emotional, and physical diseases are caused by negative emotions that were mishandled and become stored in our bodies. I experienced something along these lines years ago. After I had a chiropractic adjustment, I came home and immediately I was in this deep depression. I was just immobilized. I remember sitting on the couch being very aware that this dark cloud was hanging over me, and I'd never experienced this before. So I called up the doctor and told him what happened, and he said, "Oh, I'm sure that the adjustment must have released some stored emotion in your body." That was the first time I'd ever heard this. This was probably 30 years ago. But since then, I've learned the truth of it, that emotions get stored in our body if they're not allowed to be expressed. So when we learn how to do that with our children, they just become healthier people all the way around. So we've been told we can't trust our emotions, but you can trust your emotions 100% of the time to tell you what's going on in your heart. And that's the role of emotions. We haven't understood the role of emotions, but as we've said in the past, is what the Bible calls the heart, science calls the subconscious. Well, it's called subconscious for a reason, because it's below our consciousness. We're not even aware what's in there. That's the beauty of emotions. They tell us what's in our heart, what's going on, so that we can address it. And I love what Chris Blackaby says, that emotions tell us what we believe. This is so true, because you and I can experience the same situation, and we can both have different responses based on what's in our heart. So I remember years ago, I was visiting my daughter in Florida, and we were sitting at a park, and there was a busy street behind us, and people were crossing the street to come to the park. Well, all of a sudden I hear this loud thud, and I turn around to see what it is, and I see this woman and her bicycle flying through the air. She'd been hit by a car, and I immediately freaked out. I was beside myself, uncontrollably, upset. And my daughter calmly says, "Mom, calm down. I will go check and make sure she's okay." Well, there's already a whole bunch of people around her. And it turns out she was fine. She got up, she was talking, she was walking, nothing was broken, nothing was bleeding. And you can see how I jumped to a conclusion. I thought the woman was dead. But my emotional response was completely the opposite of my daughter, who just saw it as a happening and went to get the facts about it and see what was going on. So that tells me that something in my heart must be traumatized, that incident triggered something that was there. So I don't have time to go in it here, but in the back of the book and also on the website, there's a prayer of transformation that you can use as an adult to allow these emotional opportunities to address your heart and to, with the Holy Spirit, heal those parts of your heart that are triggering these negative responses or unnatural. I had an unnatural response to that, so something was wrong. So what do emotions tell us about our beliefs? We're not talking about theological or doctrinal beliefs. It's telling you what you believe about yourself, about life, about God, and about others by how you respond in these situations. So, for example, if you lost your job, if your spouse came in and said, "I want a divorce," your child's being rebellious and staying out all night and whatever, or your stock portfolio crashes, how do you respond to these things? How you respond to these types of things in your life tell you what you believe about God, about yourself, about the world, and about other people. So, do you feel like, "Oh my gosh, I'm all alone. Where's God? God doesn't love me. Do I even matter? Am I good enough?" All these kind of things. Those are the deep-seated beliefs that we need to know about so that we can bring them into alignment with the truth of what God says about us and about himself, so that we can have that right relationship with God that affects our life in a positive way. Because when we have these questions about, does God really love me? Does he really take care of me? Does he really provide for me? Am I safe? Do I matter? These are just core beliefs that we all inherited from the fall that need to be worked out of us. And emotions are huge in allowing us to address those things and to even know that they're there. So watch your emotions and notice how you react and respond to different situations, and that will tell you what's going on in your heart. So in that regard, emotions are 100% reliable. They will always tell you the truth about your heart. So when it comes to our children, emotions are super helpful in us teaching them how to guard their own heart and to guard it for them while they're small, but also to connect with them so that we can have influence in their life. Now, if you have teenagers and you're just learning all about graceful parenting and how to establish their identity, this tool right here, connecting with their emotions, is going to be a huge, huge help to you, because that's what teenagers need. They need to know that they're heard, that they're understood, that they have value. So using this tool that I'm going to go through here in just a minute will help you to connect with your teenager, and it'll make a huge difference, especially if you have kind of a rocky situation with teenagers. I get a lot of calls from parents of teenagers. So I've seen them turn around very quickly when parents utilize this approach. So instead of dreading the outbursts, negative emotional experiences our children have, you'll be looking forward to them once you learn this process, because you'll be able then to help them navigate and connect with their heart. Because the negative situations are the best opportunity for parents to connect with their child's heart and gain influence. So Dr. Tori Olds says this, that if children are left alone with their emotions, they're naturally overwhelmed. And that's because they're not equipped to deal with them. They don't even know what they are. So step one in this 3-step process is that you allow your child to express his emotions. First of all, emotions are normal. We don't need to be afraid of them. Everyone has them. And they're unique to the individual, as I've already said. But when you understand that emotions actually trigger a chemical response in the body that creates feelings in our body, it's actually a physiological event, then it makes it less scary. Because if you think emotions are just something ethereal or spiritual that you can't get a hold of, then it makes it more difficult to manage them. But what happens is when your heart has an emotion, it sends a signal to the brain, and the brain signals the body to emit a chemical set that creates that feeling in your body. So if your emotion is sadness, your brain will tell the body to release chemicals that literally make you feel sad in your body. Or if it's happy, you'll feel happy. So feelings are the result of an emotion. Feelings are the expression in the body of the emotion. And that's why these can cause disease, because if it's a chemical and it's not allowed to be expressed, then you suppress it and it becomes stored in your body. And over time, more and more of these negative emotions are stored, and that's when it causes problems. So once you understand that if the emotions are allowed to be, or if they're allowed to be expressed, that the chemicals will break down and dissipate within 90 seconds. So that's why they say, count to 30 before you say anything when you're angry. It's really true. Those chemicals begin to break down and dissipate if we allow them. Otherwise, they're stored in the body. Step 2 then is once you allow your child to express his emotions and you don't try to shut him down, because isn't that what we typically do? We either brush it off because we don't want our kids to feel bad. So we tell them, oh, it's okay. Well, what does that mean? It's okay. If your child's upset, it's not okay, right? Or we downplay it. We say, it's not a big deal. Don't be upset. And then what are we doing? We're negating their emotions, saying that your emotion's not valid. But what we want to do in step 2 is we want to validate their emotion and honor it, and letting them know, yeah, if you feel that way, it's valid. You feel that way, it's real, it's true for you, right? Even if it's something simple to us. Or sometimes we try to explain it away. That's when we use logic, which is the language of the head, and we try to speak to the heart with logic. But the language of the heart, as we've said, is emotions. If I haven't already said that. So the language of the heart is emotions. If we want to connect with our child's heart, we have to respond effectively to their emotions. Otherwise, they're just hitting a brick wall, and they just, after a while, they don't express emotions anymore, and they start suppressing them themselves. And that's what happens when we don't know how to come alongside our children and help them navigate their emotions. But when you do that, it's huge. It's huge. It's a game changer. I mean, you think about your own childhood. Did you ever have your parents honor and validate your emotions and empathize, which is step 3? I mean, I didn't. So we either brush them off, downplay them, try to explain them away, or sometimes we even shame our children. Well, if you hadn't done this, then that wouldn't have happened and you wouldn't feel bad. So we even bring shame on our children for having emotions. And so we're negating the expression of their true self. And it all goes back to the golden rule. If we would just treat other people the way we want to be treated, think about it when you're upset. You want someone to listen, to allow you to express. You want someone to validate, say, yeah, I can see why you're upset. And you want someone to empathize and say, you know what, I felt that way too. And so that's all we need to do. We just need to allow the emotion, the expression of it, honor it, validate it, and empathize. So you're coming alongside when you empathize. You're saying, I understand your struggle. I'm on your side. I've felt that way. Maybe you say, I felt the same when ... So, and you're not trying to fix anything. That's what we usually try to do as parents. We want to run in and we want to address the circumstances that cause the emotion. Well, that doesn't teach our children anything except that everything has to be in order for them to be happy, or other people have to treat them a certain way for them to be happy, or circumstances have to be thus and so for them to be happy. But if you teach your child to navigate negative emotions, he will be equipped to handle whatever comes his way. And so that's huge, because a lot of parents try to prepare the path for their child so everything just goes perfectly so they don't ever get upset. Well, that doesn't prepare them for life. If you teach them to navigate emotions, you're preparing them for whatever path they encounter. And so then they can navigate it. It's not going to throw them off if things don't go their way. Because you see adults all the time reacting in a way that's, just demanding their way, or becoming angry, or becoming violent, or becoming abusive. Why? Because they've never been taught how to navigate their own emotions. So you can see why this is a huge, huge factor in successful leadership. So some warnings. When you go through this process with your child, and I don't have a lot of time to elaborate. So like I said, you can go to the book. There's more in there about the process. There's also a course on my website that explains step by step how to apply this process, the 3-step process. So you can look at that as well. But I want to warn you, when you go through this process, don't lecture, don't give advice, don't use logic, and don't shame your child. Allowing just you're taking all judgment out of it. Like we said, emotions are automatic. We don't choose to have emotions. You're going to react the way you react because of the way you're wired and because of your experiences. Some kids are more resilient than others, and some kids are more sensitive, and things easily throw them off. You can't judge. That's the way they are. You just equip them to navigate their emotions effectively. So when you do this, what you're going to find is a lot less drama, you're going to eliminate meltdowns and tantrums, because I love what Dr. Sandy Gluckman says about tantrums, is that tantrums are the ultimate cry for help. If you think about it, if you're drowning and you cry out, help, help, and someone says, oh, be quiet, you'll be fine. It's not that big of a deal. Why are you afraid anyway? Typical responses we have to our kids' emotions, right? And they're crying for help. Their emotion is their heart expressing a need. But if you were drowning and someone said those things to you, you would cry louder. And that's exactly what causes a tantrum, is that the child's emotional need is not being heard, or their emotional expression. And so it escalates. So we think if we acknowledge the emotion, it will escalate. But the opposite is true. If we acknowledge it, it will be quiet, because now it's heard. It doesn't need to escalate. So that's about all the time I have for today. If you are, like I said, next week we're going to wrap up the book. It'll be the last session we have together, and I'll have a special invitation for you then. Also, I would like to ask, if you're getting something out of this program, please consider donating. You can go to the TV program tab on the website and find the donation button there. Thanks so much for joining me today. Next week we'll wrap up with a very interesting topic. And until then, take care and God bless.